There was a Twitter privacy policy update, terms of service update, something along those lines. I remember seeing it in the app on my phone. Yeah, there you go. I got a screenshot of it, Brett. Um,
Yeah,
did you actually click
yeah.
through the links and see what they changed?
Well, the first thing I did, like I was on my iPhone and pulled up the Twitter app and got greeted by this, and you notice you either say okay or you can't use the app anymore. So it's like how you got to say okay before you really know what you're saying okay to, unless you go to the Twitter Privacy Center. And look, this is the first time I actually did this. I did this because privacy has taken on a whole new thing for me in the last year or so. So this is the first time I actually did not just go right to okay and hit. Let me try the Twitter Privacy Center, and so this is kind of takes you to this page. It's actually a blog post that went up on, I believe it was on Tuesday. So you could we got the URL here, so you can actually go and check this out. But I took a couple of screenshots of some of the things that caught my attention in the update and the things that are changing. And so Twitter Spaces. I think the last time they did update, I don't think really Twitter Spaces was even really a thing, or at least wasn't a thing that was public. So now they are accounting for what's going on with Twitter Spaces. And for those who don't know what Twitter Spaces is, if you are familiar at all with Clubhouse, it's like an audio, what do they call it now? Social audio or drop-in audio, where you can start an audio conversation on the Twitter platform, and supposedly people that you're connected to get notified, and they can come in, they can either listen or you can promote them to be a speaker. So all of a sudden, instead of 100 or 280 characters of text, now you're able to talk, and you could have guests talk. And so it could be a lot of people talking. Well, all that talking gets transcribed into actual text. And so what you're seeing here is, we analyze data from Spaces to provide audio transcripts. So there it is. There's the transcripts to review for potential violations. That's what they said. But, it doesn't really say what else they could do with those audio transcriptions, because not only are they transcripts, they know who's saying what, when they're saying it, what device they're saying it on, like we kind of just talked about. There's a lot of data that all of a sudden was not at Twitter's disposal that is now at Twitter's disposal, and they had to update their policy. But and as they say, all spaces are currently public. Your presence in a space and anything you broadcast is public. So basically, you're saying it's up for grabs. What are you guys saying?
And there is the way, if you look at something like an audio transcription, right? It is likely that Twitter has developed their own technology for doing this audio transcription. They're big. I'm assuming that is the case. What happens in a lot of companies, particularly small companies that don't have the same expertise, what they do is they use some other third party for doing this audio transcription. So which means this audio files passed on to another third party who does audio transcriptions, and you get that in return. And we don't have visibility on the business model of those companies, right? Basically, this is a data leak from one vendor to another vendor. Now, transcriptions is one part. The same applies for translation. What if you're speaking in a different language, and that audio is transcribed to, let's say, a Japanese or a Spanish or any language, and then that is translated? And does the vendor build their own translation engine, or do they depend on third-party translation engine? If so, how good are those translation engines? So typically, they go to a third-party translation engines, and who knows what those business models are for those. As a user, you may not know that the length of that chain out there, and where the leaks are in each of these points. That is an unknown in a lot of these services out there.
I mean, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Google and Amazon both have transcription and translation services, either through AWS or GCP. I'm sure Azure has something as well. So usually the bigger cloud providers have this service that they offer, and then there's probably some smaller vendors that do something similar.
Yes, in a lot of those cases, the relevant translate tool is the free. I was saying the tool part is the free. The data part is what is monetized. That's why the tool itself is free. So that is the reason such tools get popular. So what happens is when a smaller vendor doesn't have a translation thing, they depend on some of these bigger providers to get the translation done. In return, your data is compromised.
Right.
And so how deep and how open are they about all the possible leaks, data leaks, is something that vendors or customers have to look at.
All right, I'm going to go up to the next bullet point here around autoplay. Now I know, we upload video clips to Twitter, and depending on what your setting is, in the default setting, I think is autoplay, it automatically starts. So this was interesting. It says we recently updated the way audio videos on autoplay work on Twitter. When you watch or interact with content from these partners, so they have third parties, uploading video, and if you're set to default to on, that means you're getting, the third party is actually getting you to a certain extent. When you watch or interact with content from these partners, they may receive and process some data as described in their privacy policy. So immediately it's pulling out of hand. I mean, if you are on the default setting of autoplay on, this is already taking place.
It goes back to the same point, but the chain of data linkages in the privacy thread that is unknown, and I think there has to be a way where vendors should talk about who has access to your data. They have to be open about it. I think we have to get to that stage. We're not there. We're not even close to it.
Last one here I wanted to bring up to you guys. Payments. We may receive information about your transactions now that they're having premium services. So people are going to start having to pay, and they're going to use some kind of payment service to pay. So we may receive information about your transactions, such as when it was made or when it is set to expire or auto renew. So all of a sudden, whenever there's, let's say, a new feature or function or anything, the data involved changes, and that makes them have to change. And we're not just talking about Twitter specifically. Any service you use, basically, when they do a feature or a new update or new feature or new whatever, there's a data implication to that. And that data implication is something that I think a lot of us users have, at least over the past years, kind of just shrugged at or said, well, whatever, I just want to use the service. But you really have to start thinking about the data implications and who this data might end up getting into their hands.
Yeah, as long as that exchange is transparent. I think we talked about that last time too. Like I'm using Twitter for free. I kind of understand they're going to take something and show me ads for it, but I guess what they're showing, how clearly they explain it to me, that's kind of the important. Then I can choose to opt in or opt out, right? Ultimately, would it kind of be fair if I went through my Twitter settings, turned off all my tracking, and said no, but then still use the service for free, right? If they don't want people like that, they can just not allow free users or not allow that option, which is ultimately what ends up happening, right? But it's just not very transparent for what is actually collected. And then, like Raju was talking about, that underlying data layer, where the connections are made, how that information is kind of weaved together in order to paint a different kind of picture about your user profile, essentially.
I got one more. I just forgot. This might be the most important one. They actually updated their policy to say this: Twitter does not sell your personal data.
That might be the most misleading line of any company out there, right? Because I mean, I think it's covered by legalese, so it may not sell your data, but it might give it to somebody for free in exchange for some other data. And people don't really understand. There's I would say maybe data warehouses or like the ad platforms themselves, Twitter, Facebook, Google. The probably biggest misconception is they're not in the game of selling data. They're in the game of buying data. And collecting it, because they serve the ad platform. It's the other vendors that sell data to these massive ad networks rather than the other way around. So that first line makes you feel good, but it is not really what's, I guess, the whole truth, right?
I would agree. All right, that's all I had for that. I just thought that was really, it hadn't been in there before, and apparently now it is. So that's kind of interesting.